As I said last week, I love a new year because there's something about a new year that really sort of drives us into this idea of what our hopes and our expectations, what our desires are, what we are longing for. And for some of us at the start of the new year, we really hit the ground running. And for some of us, we start strong and then we begin to fizzle. Or some of us, we've just sort of come to this idea that with all the best intentions, we're never really going to do it. And so we kind of never really set those ambitions. But what I wanted to do today on this Vision Sunday here at Harbour Church, here at St. George's, at our 10 o'clock service, is to remind us, if we've been around for a while, of what our vision is at Harbour Church. Or if this is your first time with us or you've been coming over the last couple of months, is to share and to inspire us on what God may be doing in us as a church and as a community for the people and the places of the city of Portsmouth. And this morning, I want to call this message, Strike the Ground. Strike the ground. And the reason why I've called it this passage is because we're going to read from an Old Testament passage, which on first glance we might be thinking, what on earth is going on? But you will see the title of this message right at the heart of this Old Testament passage. And we're going to read, and the words are going to come up on the screen, from 2 Kings chapter 13, verses 14 to 19. And it says this: Now Elisha, who is a prophet of God in the Old Testament, Elisha had been suffering from illness from which he died. Joash, king of Israel, went down to see him and wept over him. my father, Joash cried, the chariots and the horsemen of Israel. Elisha said, get a bow and some arrows. And so Joash did so. Take the bow in your hands, he said to the king of Israel. And when he had taken it, Elisha put his hands on the king's hands. Elisha says, open the east window. And he opened it. Shoot, Elisha said, and he shot. And Elisha said, the Lord's arrow of victory, the arrow of victory over Aram, Elisha declared. You will completely destroy the Arameans at Aphek. Then he said, take the arrows, and the king took them. And Elisha told them, strike the ground. Strike the ground. And so Joash takes the arrows and he strikes it 3 times and stops. Elisha, the man of God, was angry with him and said, you should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times. Then you would have defeated Aram and completely destroyed it. But now you will defeat it only 3 times. Elisha died and was buried. A strong, parting, prophetic gift and word spoken by Elisha to King Joash, the king of Israel. And what is happening here in this passage is that we have the people of God, Israel, and there is this prophetic word of victory over this nation, over this community, over this group called Aram. Aram was this community probably known now in 2026 as Syria, centered in the capital in Damascus. And Aram was both the geographical and the political enemies and competition and opposition to the people of God. And Elisha says to King Joash, shoot an arrow out of the window to represent victory over the opposition. And then he says, take those arrows and strike the ground. He strikes it 3 times, and Elisha, in this prophetic anger, the voice and the reason of God himself in heaven, gets angry and says, if you'd only struck the ground 5 or 6 times, you would have had full victory. This story is an invitation and an encouragement, inspiration for us that we have a vision of victory. We have a vision of victory. Elisha says to Joash, the king of Israel, and he says to each and every one of us today, as God's faithful people, as his followers, shoot, Elisha said. The Lord's arrow of victory, the arrow of victory. We are victorious because of Jesus. We are victorious because God made us, he designed us, he created us for relationship with him. God is with us and for us, battling with us and for us. But we have full victory in what Jesus has already done on the cross. That if we were to shoot and to align ourselves and to fix our attention only on Jesus, we will experience the victory of more hope, of more peace, of more joy, of more love. We will see victory over the circumstances and the challenges that we face. We will experience victory over our health. We will experience victory in our relationships. We will experience victory over God's provision over our finances if we fix our eyes on Jesus. And our vision here at Harbour Church is each one of us, if we call Harbour our home, is to play our part in seeing Jesus known, the church alive, and the city transformed. Our vision is a vision of victory because we believe that Jesus is alive and with us today in each one of us that follows him and around and in our city. And so we, just like Joash, the king of Israel in this story, is invited to play our part, to shoot the arrow of victory into the city of Portsmouth. We want to see people, bless you, we want to see people come to know Jesus. If the arrow is in our hands and we are playing our part to shoot the vision and the victory of Jesus, will we be expectant to invite friends or colleagues or neighbors or family to come to know Jesus? Will we invite them along on Sunday mornings here at our 10 o'clock service at St. George's? Will we invite them to our other services across our other locations? Will we invite them to come and join Alpha this term to explore faith? Will you invite them with expectation? Our vision is that the church would be alive. We want to see this church community across our 3 locations grow and thrive and serve and grow in the gifts that God has for us. It's a vision of victory, and we want to see the city of Portsmouth transformed for Jesus. That as people come to know Jesus, as the church is alive, that hearts and lives would be transformed. That people would be healed and set free. That addictions would be broken, that those that need support would be cared for and loved and provided for, that the light would shine in the darkness and the darkness would not overcome it. Our vision is that we would see Jesus known, the church alive, and the city transformed. It's a vision of Jesus' victory. But how do we do that? Firstly, I believe that we need to elevate our expectation. We need to elevate our expectation. Joash the king takes the arrows invited by Elisha the prophet, and he says, strike the ground with your faith and expectation of the victory that you want to experience over your opposition. And Joash takes the arrows and he strikes the ground 3 times. And Elisha says, you should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times, then you would have defeated Aram and completely destroyed it. We need to elevate our expectation. We need to stretch our faith in what God will do in us and through us in 2026. Because what is brilliant is, as the leader of Harbour Church over the last couple of years since moving to Portsmouth, is that I am just consistently struck and blown away by how much we do as a church to serve and love the people of this city. I'm always struck by the consistent stories of people that come to know Jesus. I'm struck by the stories how this church is alive and moving and serving the city, and the stories of the city being transformed. Whether that be through loving and serving kids and youth, whether that's reaching and telling students about Jesus, whether that's serving through our Love Your Neighbour programs, whether that's here on a Sunday, whether that's on production or worship, that we do so much as a church. And so it's easy for us to come into 2026 being like, what's the vision? Well, the vision hasn't changed, and the vision won't change. And we'll continue to do what we do, serving kids and youth and students and those in need in the city and those that want to come to know Jesus. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. But what shifts for 2026? My simple invitation is that maybe for us, we need to elevate our expectation. Alpha. We run Alpha every term because we believe it's a brilliant tool for people to come to know Jesus and come to faith and build a relationship with him. And I wonder, well, not even wonder, I know because I've spoken to a lot of you where we've been running Alpha at Harbour for the last 9 years, every term, 3 times a year. And I've had conversations with many of you where you've said, I've invited my friends and they just keep saying no. And maybe like Joash, the king, is it feels like you've struck the ground 3 times and you're done. But would you allow the Holy Spirit, God's presence, to elevate your expectation, to keep striking the ground, to keep on inviting, to keep having faith that maybe at the right time and at the right moment, because of God's presence, that invitation to a friend, neighbor, or colleague or family, that they will say yes to the invitation. Maybe you've been disappointed over the last year and you expected God to bring more victory in your life. Will you keep striking the ground? Keep stepping into the vision that God has for you and for us. Will you elevate your expectation of what God might do in you and through you? The reason that I have the privilege of doing what I do, being a leader of Harbour Church and a leader in the Church of England, a vicar, a priest, is because an Elisha-type character came up to me when I was in my early 20s. Many of you know this, but at this point, I'd just recently become a Christian. And I was a lifeguard and a manager of a sports centre in this little pool. And I was thinking, after coming to faith and building a relationship with Jesus, what is God calling me to for the future? And I had high expectations, but I just didn't know. And this amazing youth leader of the church that I joined when I became a Christian, a guy called Toby, he took me out for coffee one time. He said, Lewis, I've got an invitation for you, a little bit like Elisha and Joash shooting an arrow out of the window with vision and expectation. He said, would you drop your salary? Now, when I say that, I'm working at a tiny village sports centre, so it's not exactly like, I'm not living in a 7-bed mansion anyway. And he said, would you drop your salary? We can't pay you anything, but would you come and take a year out, and would you come and serve at our church, and would you come and serve kids and youth? And I remember for the next couple of weeks, I was just grappling with this idea of letting go this sort of vision and this path that I thought I had to maybe chase after a vision of victory that God had for me. And I kept wrestling with this idea of what God had in store for me and for my life. And so after a couple of weeks, I sat down with Toby and I said, I sort of think I'm maybe up for the adventure. but I don't think I can do it without any money. And maybe it was a little bit cheeky of him, but he challenged me and he said, we can provide you with accommodation with a family, but would you just invest a specific amount of time to press into the vision that God has for you beyond the practicalities that you hope for? And what I realized, that this elevation of expectation could have seemed quite cheeky, but he knew me so well that he knew what I needed was to stretch that faith muscle. And so I took a deep breath. I said a few prayers. I put my trust in Jesus, and I said yes. And 4 months into this gap year, this, if you like, what we do here, a ministry development year, after 4 months, he said to me, Lewis, are you enjoying doing this? And I said, yeah, Toby, I absolutely love it. He said, do you think you might want to do this for longer than just a year? And I said, yeah, absolutely, I love this. He went, good. Me and my wife, we're moving to Sheffield to plant a church. You're going to take over the youth group. And I was like, oh, all right. It's because he had a hope and a vision of victory, and he wanted to tease me in the presence of the Spirit, God's living presence, to elevate my expectation. And since then, Jesus has taken me on a wild adventure, elevating my expectation of what God can do in me and through me. I wonder what God is asking of you this morning, to elevate your expectation of what he can do in you and through you. And when we elevate our expectations, secondly, we need to operate out of obedience. Elisha says to Joash, the king of Israel, take the arrows, and the king took them, and Elisha said, strike the ground. If we elevate our expectation, what is God asking of us in 2026 to see his kingdom come in Portsmouth as it is in heaven? Maybe for some of us it's joining a group and being part regularly of a faithful community that is chasing after Jesus. Maybe for some of us it's joining a team and playing your part in all the wonderful things that we do here at Harbour, whether that's serving and loving our Harbour kids or our Harbour youth. Maybe that's investing in our Harbour Co and our students. Maybe that's serving in our Love Your Neighbour programs, coming and serving or helping to feed people at our Safe Harbour meals on a Monday or a Saturday morning breakfast. Maybe that's getting involved if you can on a Tuesday morning. Maybe that's playing your part in worship or production. Maybe it's simply coming on a Sunday morning just to be a smiley presence at the door for someone that is nervous about stepping into church for the first time. There are big things that we can do that require specific gifts, but I believe each and every one of us can elevate our expectation and to operate out of the obedience of what God is inviting us to. And so my question is, for 2026, what's God inviting you to do to play your part? Is God asking you to pray? And you can pray this week for our 7:14 prayer campaign. Set the alarms, set the reminders for 7:14 a.m., 7:14 p.m., and just spend 7 days regularly praying for the people of Portsmouth. Or you can join us on Wednesday morning for the relaunch of our KC 7:30 prayer call, where we gather each week in term to pray for our church, for our community, and for our city. And if that sounds exciting, but you're like, oh, 7:30 a.m. on Zoom, what does that look like? What's amazing is that there's no expectation to turn on videos or come off mute. What is brilliant is that some people on these prayer calls, they're like literally at work. For example, we heard from him a while ago, but Neil, who's part of our Copner location, St. Albans location, he's a postman, and often he will have his video on of him in the post office getting all his letters sorted, and he's joining in at 7:30 to pray for the city because he's elevated his expectation of what God will do if he prays. For others, they join around the kitchen table whilst family are going out to crazy and having breakfast all together, but they want to pray. Maybe on the way to work. Make sure your videos are off because it's distracting. But come and join us. Would you elevate your expectation? Would you operate out of obedience? And would you come and pray for God to move? Or it might be to join a group, to join a team. It might be thinking about how you give financially. What is God asking of you to see his vision of victory in 2026? And so my encouragement is, for us as a church for 2026, would we strike the ground? Would we keep on going? Keep on elevating your expectation. Keep operating out of the obedience of what God is inviting you to do for his kingdom. Would you consistently each day keep striking the ground in the way that you wake up and spend time with Jesus, that you would follow the model that Jesus gives to us, that he only did what he saw the Father doing? So how did he do that? Well, every day and every moment, Jesus was stopping to see what his Father in heaven was doing, to then be obedient to what his Father was calling him to. What are your rhythms at the start of the day? Would you prioritize Jesus? Would you shoot the arrow? Would you be fixated on Jesus this year to see what he can do in you and through you? Would you strike the ground?